All right. Hello, climate friends, and welcome to another Power Lunch episode in the 1000 Conversations About Our Future series. This is a project of the Ithaca Green New Deal that aims to engage all of you in a conversation about the future of Ithaca. And as always, I'm your lovely and charming host, Rebecca Evans, Sustainability Planner with the City of Ithaca. And today we're going to talk about a really exciting downtown project that is exploring the electrification of a low-income multifamily housing property. And the project is not only piloting how to electrify, but how to really fully optimize the entire building for sustainability and tenant comfort. And of course, this is part of the larger electrification program that the city is exploring in conjunction with Alturas and Block Power to electrify all 6,000 buildings in the city of Ithaca. And this is just a really special project that's part of that program. So with us today are two of the leaders working on this project, Johanna Anderson, Executive Director of Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, the organization that actually manages the Henry St. John building, and Guillermo Metz, Energy Team Lead of Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County and coordinator of the Henry St. John project. So welcome back, Johanna, and welcome to Guillermo. It's great to have you both. And I'm hoping that we can start this conversation with just sort of a general overview of the project. So maybe starting with you, Johanna, reviewing kind of the history of the building and its use and the relationship with INHS. And then Guillermo, maybe shifting to you for a general overview of what the project is trying to accomplish and maybe some of the key players.
Sure.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you for having me back. Henry St. John, it is a brick building that used to be a school. It was built in 1919. It has approximately 2,400 square feet. The two floors that are above grade are split into, we've got 12 residential apartment units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. It also has a full-size gymnasium, and the lower floors in the basement area, those portion of it is being used by INHS to house some of our different department staff. And then we've also got some other tenants in there who are nonprofit or private entrepreneurs. INHS purchased this building in the early 80s and converted it to the rentals. And over the years now, we have gotten to the point where the natural life cycle for a lot of the systems in this building need to be replaced. So it runs on a boiler, and that's natural gas, and we need to, it's coming to the end of its useful life. So we're looking at different options for what we can do with it. The roof also is needing to be redone. And so there's just so many large capital improvements that need to happen with this building. And so we really felt like this would be a great example for Alturas to use as their kind of starter building for an electrification, because it not only is it old, it has an older electrical system. It also happens to be historic. So it has all of these different components to it that really are going to make it quite complicated. And we figured that that would be a really good starter project for this team to work on, so that we could work out every possible issue ahead of time, so that when we roll this out to the rest of the city, that a lot of these kind of complicated issues would have already been addressed, or there would be a process for that. So, Guillermo, you want to talk about the team?
Sure. And this is something that you and Luis have been working on for several months, probably since late fall, early winter of last year. And I was brought on just a few months ago to help coordinate some of these different players. But yeah, it was kind of intentionally thought of as a pilot project while the other pieces were being put together for the larger electrification of the whole city. And so Luis had been working with some, I guess what we call solutions providers, to do some of the decarbonization, so that if you bring different solutions together and really plug them into one building to try to see how they can play together and what it takes to make them work together to eventually get to that deep decarbonization. And so I think you're right that it's a really interesting building in terms of being historic and having some of these other challenges some of which are unique, some of which are going to be met or also found by other commercial, building owners, multifamily housing, et cetera, in the city and beyond. So as an example for the whole state. So some of these solutions providers are essentially, I can mention companies. Loom is provides solar solutions so that if you're planning on putting solar on the roof or on somewhere on site, they can parse out that whole solar array to individual tenants inside the building. So you can essentially, individually meter tenants on one large array, or at least track their usage. So that is the intent. I should say, we're exploring a lot of different options with this building and still trying to see which of them are physically feasible and which of them might be financially feasible. So that's all being worked out still. And so, for example, you mentioned the roof is needing repairs. So the intent at this point is to do a whole new roof, upgrade it with some additional insulation, and then put solar on top. That's what's sort of being explored at this point. So solar, there's Switch is a company that is looking at doing EV charging on site. And they've done a bunch of EV chargers locally and are doing some more. Mitsubishi is a well-known heat pump manufacturer, and so we're working directly with Mitsubishi, and they are going to be working through INHS with some local contractors to pursue heat pump heating and cooling of the entire building. So as Johanna, you mentioned, the boiler is old, and the other option is for folks to have individual window AC units at this point. So this will provide cooling and heating for the entire building is the intent. There is a controls company called Hub Controls, which we can get into a little bit of the issues around, again, the older building and trying to work some of these things in. But Hub provides controls that can work with boilers, and turn on heating systems on and off to maximize the efficiency of the system. They're trying to see if that can also work with heat pumps. Excuse me. Also, battery backup system. Urban Electric Power, which is actually down in the Hudson Valley. They're working on this project to provide battery backup to the entire building. So you've got the solar, you've got the EV charging, battery backup. So to really maximize on-site energy usage at time of use, when you need it, who needs it, and parse it out that way so that it's not just all grid electricity all the time. May be able to provide a little bit of backup, security to the tenants as well. You've got a gymnasium there. You have what could be a community space if we were to have, like a major heat event in the summer or blackouts in the winter or something that, people need to, for safety reasons, congregate somewhere else. It may be possible to use it as a site like that. And I think we're going to need to be looking at buildings like that in the future more and more. So all of these different solutions providers, then Alturas, as you mentioned, is the company that's providing the financing to make it all possible. And it's sort of something that we're still exploring and trying to learn a little bit about how it's going to work. But Alturas provides essentially long-term, low-interest loans, or in some cases also leases the equipment to the building owner. So rather than the building owner owning it, the advantage there is that they don't have to pay for it up front. So it's paid for over time as a sort of a lease on the equipment, almost a power purchase agreement or a benefits off the energy savings are paid over time. So yeah, it's challenging because it's an old building. It is historic, actually, not just old, but it's going to have to be reviewed by the Ithaca or the historic preservation folks. The roof needs replacement. The thermostat I mentioned. So having these hub controls talk to the system, it has pneumatic thermostats, which is just a pretty old way of doing things. So things are going to have to be talking to each other in sort of a different way. Some things are going to have to be changed out. A common challenge is the tenants pay for the electricity, but INHS or the building owner, which could be another kind of scenario somewhere else, pays the gas. That's really common. So there's sort of split incentive. And so when we electrify everything, we're switching gas off of gas onto electric. Does that put more of a burden onto the tenants? And I really appreciate INHS has thought about that and has a commitment to figure out, not just to dump that added load onto the tenant, but to try to figure out a solution. And it's really a test case to learn from and work out some of these bumps and figure out some of these solutions.
And it's interesting as we've started progressing along with the scope of work, we're seeing that additional items need to happen. So we're replacing windows, all of the windows right now. We're getting quotes to have that done. It won't necessarily be done as part of the electrification, but it certainly impacts the energy use of the building. And where we're at right now, I feel like we're in this assessment period right now, where INHS we're turning over all of this data, all of the schematics to these different teams so that they can basically size their equipment and model it on how much energy it's going to use and then what we can expect the cost to be. And then the financing company will take all of that, excuse me, and come up with a financing package that then they'll present back to us. But at this point, we're still like sending out all of the information. And so we don't have a whole lot of answers just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a process. It's taken months. It's going to take even longer. Part of that is, INHS is in a really good position. You have staff and you have dedicated people there who have collected a lot of data, and that's been terrific. So we have electric and gas usage going back, for a while. That has really helped the team put together the information they've been able to put together. We are still looking to get an energy audit by a local engineering firm that will then, even more, provide even more detail to everything. Yeah, and so the other piece is bringing NYSEG into all of this conversation. Obviously, changing everything over to electric on this one building already could impact that little area of Ithaca. Changing all of Ithaca over to electric is going to be a giant lift for the utility company. So that's a whole other piece of trying to bring the city into it. The city has more of a voice with NYSEG than an individual building owner might. Obviously, INHS is an owner of a large portfolio of buildings. But even so, I think it's going to take the city and landlords, commercial building owners, and folks like yourselves to put some pressure behind NYSEG to work with the city to really be able to upgrade the lines that need to be upgraded, the transmission, the infrastructure, and allow the electrification to proceed.
Yeah. But and this is Henry St. John is actually that's where our main offices are. We're in an adjacent building, so we share a large parking lot with all of the tenants. And as an organization, we have quite a sizable fleet vehicles. We've got just under 15 vehicles. The vast majority of them are full-size vans. We've got about 4 pickups, and the office car is the Prius. But we're very cognizant of the fact that going forward, we need to be committed to incorporating electric vehicles into our fleet as we turn them over. And so if we've got, 10 electric vehicles, they need a place to charge. And so we've got to make sure that the stations are in there and thinking long term. Right now, we're looking at just putting 2 charging stations with 2 different ports in, but we also need to run the lines so that we can build off of that as we grow our fleet, as our staff transitions over to EV. So we want to make sure that there is room for thoughtful growth.
Mhm.
And I think that's a lot of what we've been doing right now, and trying to budget long term for all of these expenses. Because at this point, an electric full-size van that needs to hold full-size sheets of drywall and large equipment, those are really quite, they're out of our price point right now. And while we acknowledge that that's the case today, I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see those prices come down quite a bit.
Yeah, and even the supply, they're really hard to get right now. I'm sure, I think FedEx and companies like that have bought up a bunch, but I don't think they're really that easy to get for a smaller group like yourself. I saw my first Rivian electric pickup truck over at the high school yesterday, so
Yes.
they're around a little bit. But yeah, no, that's a challenge, and I think that we've already heard, as far as just the electric vehicle side, the sort of the growth has been larger than expected, even, but it's got to be even more, obviously. But it's the supply chain problems that have plagued everything have obviously plagued cars and plagued used cars and electric vehicles and everything. So it's really hard to get them in particular right now. It slowed things down quite a bit. But yeah, I think that trajectory is really moving towards getting a lot of all of this kind of at least small and mid-sized vehicles fully electrified in the next few years.
Mhm.
So that's really terrific that INHS has that commitment to thinking forward and saying, if we're going to be doing this infrastructure upgrade over here, let's go ahead and run some lines now, maybe upgrade the wiring a little bit so that in a few years, when we are quite confident that we're going to need to provide more charging to more vehicles, it's already in place.
Mhm.
That saves a lot of money if folks can think that way ahead of time.
Yes, and we are very committed to sustainable development, and it's it's easy for us. I shouldn't say easy, but it's much simpler for us to be putting these components into new construction builds. That that's great. It's going back to the our existing portfolio and figuring out how to thoughtfully reduce their carbon footprint. They were, at the time, they were designed to really be as an efficient building as we could afford and that the budget would allow. And many of them have achieved LEED certification, Energy Star ratings, Green Community ratings. And so that's all well and good, but they may still have a natural gas boiler. And so we need to go back and address that and put together a larger kind of capital needs assessment for our entire portfolio and determine when is the appropriate time to go back and do these retrofits. But going forward, we've already made that commitment that all new buildings, whether it's single family or rentals, they're all electric. So that's already there. And then we've got our first development coming along that is going to be the first affordable housing development in upstate New York to achieve passive house certification. It will be using geothermal. It will be using community solar. So we're very excited about all of these new technologies and these new development styles. So we're doing everything that we can at this point, and I'm eager to hear back from the team on Henry St. John about how this plan is actually going to work. And once we all agree to it, I believe the timeline is going to be moving pretty fast. Most of the work should be done before the end of this year.
Yeah, I think one of the holdups again might be just getting that equipment in place, but I think you're right. Things could move quickly once we get all the pieces together, and that's what takes quite a while and the coordination. But like you mentioned, new construction, you kind of know what you have to do. When you're talking about a building that, I think that Henry St. John was from 1919 and has had upgrades over the years, but it's still a 1919 building with a really old boiler, some really old funky wiring. So that presents a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about with this team is that we really don't know what we're going to find until you get into the walls, until you get into the ceilings and really open it up, because you don't know the kind of maintenance that it had prior to us purchasing it in the 80s. And so, I mean, we've got records of all of the upgrades that we've made to it and the improvements over the last 40 years or so. But prior to that, it's anyone's guess. So we'll find out. But I think it really is a beautiful building. It needs some work, some really important work, and doing this project is actually just going to ensure that it becomes that it has another several decades ahead of its life, and really will provide comfort for our tenants, comfort for other nonprofits that get to use the space. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, terrific. And before this group came together, you were already upgrading the building to some extent, just focusing on Henry St. John again. I mean, I know you've done things across your whole portfolio, but looking at this one building, I know you had already installed some heat pumps, you'd done some air sealing and things and improvements on the building. Can you kind of explain how that would have continued, or what that process would have been like? Like, what was the intent there? And then how it compares to kind of this whole building process?
So it was in 2020, and we were able to obtain a grant through Tatum Engineering to do energy monitoring for the vast majority of our portfolio, which included our main office and Henry St. John. And so over the last couple of years, we've been receiving these energy reports for each of the buildings, and for each of the reports had suggestions about upgrades that can be done and what kind of a return we would be seeing. And so at this point, that work is just finishing up, and our facilities team is going to be taking a look at that. If this electrification project did not come to us, the plan was looking at the portfolio as a whole and determining a schedule to make all of the upgrades as we either get more funding or build the reserves. Because each one of our properties has replacement reserves that they have the ability to access that can make some of these improvements. So we had already been looking at that for Henry St. John and deciding what is most critical and what is possible. And at this point right now, the boiler was definitely top of mind, and as well as the roof. Those are two critical systems that have to be replaced. And so this opportunity came along, and it was quite kismet, really, to make sure that like we could do all of these things, address everything in potentially one fell swoop, so that this was not having to be taken out over the course of 5 to 10 years. And I think the people that are living in that building are going to see just immediate improvements, because those windows, they stretch 8 to 10 feet, and that can let in a lot of sunlight and become very, very warm in the summertime, and not quite that warm in the winter. So we want to make sure that it's in the best shape it can be for those tenants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you kind of mentioned it. Timeline would have been something like 5 to 10 years to do something on the order of what we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Well, and we never want to do things just as a silo. We're always trying to figure out if can we do multiple things that will all have greater impact, because we've chosen to do it together and plan it that way. Mm-hmm. And so I think the EV charging stations is the one that I'm becoming more and more excited about, is that this really is turning into basically an electrified parking lot that a lot of people will be able to use. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, we're already talking about you've had conversations in the past also with CarShare, Ithaca CarShare, and potentially hosting one of their cars part-time if there's room,
So,
obviously.
yes, we currently host, I believe it was one of their first electric vehicles that Ithaca CarShare got. And we host that at our property, 210 Hancock, over on the north side of town. And that has worked out really well. And we're looking at other locations around the city where we have properties that we own that we could place vehicles there. And at our office here, that would definitely be a possibility, especially if we've got the charging stations.
Yeah, yeah, and with affordable housing, that is a population that we're trying to work out with CarShare. They're always trying to work out how to make their business model more accessible to more people, and if it can really be accessed by folks who live there, it gives the opportunity rather than everyone owning a car, to just get around town or get to those important appointments that need just outside of town. It's worked out really well.
Yeah, it was very nice at the launch for the EV over at 210. Ithaca CarShare came over and actually had more or less of like a little block party, and they were letting people drive the car around a little loop, and it was nice that people had the ability to experience it and realize that I could access this. This is something I can use and find useful for me and my household. So
Hmm.
I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, so if we can cite one over at Henry St. John also, obviously, as more people need the chargers, we'll have to build out perhaps. But I think it also provides that resilience. The way that they're talking about the grid, that these chargers with the battery backup on the whole building and the solar on the roof, again, the chargers also provide resilience. So in theory, there's a couple of cars, I guess, that can feed back into a building right now, but that's something that we're going to be probably doing more of in the future. If you have trucks there, even more so.
Mhm. Yes, and so with Ithaca, as climate change continues, one of the big things here is flooding. That's the big risk that we have to deal with and plan for. And so in making all of these improvements too, we're taking that into account about when we install all of this equipment into the building, a lot of it is going into the basement, and we need to make sure that it's elevated and that it's safe in the event of a catastrophic flood. We've already regraded our parking lot to take care of those drainage issues. And so all of these things I'm grateful that they're all building on one another. And so we're doing so in a very thoughtful way, I think.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, we have to solve climate change on the mitigation side and trying to reduce carbon as much as possible, also at the resiliency side and adaptation side, because we're already being affected by it and it's just going to get worse for a while. So
Mhm.
this is a great example of really trying to do both. Um,
I was curious, I've been meaning to ask you this. We've been working together on this project for a few months now, but I was always wondering, how did you end up getting involved with this other than just being a very wonderful volunteer?
Well, volunteer, yes, but also, I mean, it's really through my role at Extension. So I would say less a volunteer than someone who is able to take flexible funding and spend some time on this project. So I would have to thank the Park Foundation that provides us some of that flexible funding for my position here. So this is really along the lines of what we want to support. Not just Ithaca, not really even just Tompkins County, but regionally, and trying to support this conversion and trying to understand how to better, bring the partners together that make the deep decarbonization possible. Because this is something that is kind of new for most folks, and what Ithaca is trying to do on a grand scale is unique, really, to the world at this point. The commitment they've made, and now trying to figure out how to get there is just this huge stretch. So being a part of it is on the ground floor, trying to understand. We've been working on residential and small commercial to some extent, information with community members about heat pumps, about solar for years. And this is just another level of trying to figure out now. There's an exciting opportunity to see how all of these things could play together on a specific building. So the other point is understanding that, again, we have these different sort of service or solutions providers coming in to do the project. And I didn't mention, but as you're aware, most of these are outside the state. Some of them are outside the country. So Alume is centered or started in Australia. Now they have an office in California. Hub Controls is Irish. So it's a challenge to work with all of these different folks who are in different places. And Luis, who brought the project together, just didn't have the bandwidth to continue managing a project of that scale. And I know actually it's been really wonderful working with a couple different people at INHS who are able to kind of GC the project, general contractor or program manager of this project. But if there's any way that someone else outside can kind of help navigate some of these different companies, that's all I'm really trying to provide. And it's always talked about, but rarely done, that these kind of providers or solutions providers are brought together at the beginning of a project and then coordinated throughout a project. So even a GC has a hard time just sort of juggling everybody and saying, this day we have to have the HVAC people come and the electrician come. But rarely is it done where at the beginning of a project, before anything actually starts physically happening, to have them all come together and look at the schematics together and plan the whole project together so that efficiencies can be found, and also just issues can be resolved before anyone shows up and starts tearing into walls. So that's my intent, and it's been kind of exciting to try to make that happen.
Yes, and I'm very appreciative of it, because one of the things that we're realizing, that we have realized since the early meetings, is you have these different companies, and INHS is putting these bids out or preparing the bids for the work that needs to be done. And it's been interesting to see how they can complement one another. So there are companies out there that both Switch and Alume could work with, because the company installs both solar arrays and they do charging stations. So could we get better pricing if we combine those things? Or Hub Controls needs an electrical engineer to come in and do an assessment for one portion of our electrical system. Well, another company, Alume, may need something to figure out the different line diagrams. And so together they can have one electrical engineer come out and do these two jobs, and then the information will be sent to two different companies. It's trying to weave all of these different interests together and make it rather harmonious is a feat, and you've done a great job of it. I'm very appreciative of your patience and willingness to take good notes.
Thank you. Rebecca's joined us again.
Yeah, I thought this was a good time to hop in and echo Johanna's sentiments about how much we appreciate you, Guillermo, kind of facilitating this process and this project. We're nearing the end of time. So I just want to pose one last simple question to both of you. And, we talked a lot about, the challenges associated with this project, of which there are many, but, both of you chose to be part of this project and to help facilitate moving this project forward. So I'm wondering, what really excites you about this? What is the appeal? Yes, you both work in this space anyway, so it kind of falls into your general job description, but something is bringing you back, right? What keeps you going and going to these weekly meetings at this point and engaging with people all over the world, really, on this one building among 5,999 others?
Do you want to start?
Well, for me, yeah. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to just be able to help out the city on this pilot project. But no, I think you're right. This building and this project in particular, we're sort of complementing each other, but it's really true. INHS has been a really terrific partner on this project, and not even a partner, but leading the project. Just saying that you have a commitment to doing this kind of work on your buildings, and at the same time protecting your tenants, and at the same time sort of balancing all these things that some landlords wouldn't really have that commitment to one piece or another, or any of them. So it's in that way sort of an easy project. It's a lot less trying to convince you that this is the right thing to do, or that we have to watch out for these people's interests or those people's. So I really appreciate the foresight that you carry to this, Johanna, personally, and INHS overall, and the commitment you have. And yeah, this project, the beauty of the challenge of bringing all these companies together, but also the beauty of if it actually works. I mean, this would be amazing. The idea of bringing together, again, these sort of solutions providers, this concept of really decarbonizing a building, getting it completely off of fossil fuels and onto not just electric, not just sort of a one-by-one replacement, but a smart replacement of trying to make efficiencies on systems that can work together and really make tenants more comfortable and the whole building more resilient with a building that's over 100 years old. Is challenging, but also it would be amazing if it worked, and if we get there, most of the way, and then to do it affordably, to do it in a way that doesn't just rely on the state or the federal government or a private benefactor to throw millions and millions of dollars at it, but to try to make it replicable, that others can take a look at it and say, we may not use these exact providers, we may not use these exact systems, but we can do this sort of similar thing on our building. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love old buildings. I love old brick buildings, and I think Henry St. John is it's a gorgeous building. I get to stare at it every day out my window. It's used by a lot of members in the community because it has a playground right outside. We've got Tai Chi, we've got adult basketball leagues, we've got story time with the librarian for little kids. There's so many wonderful things about this particular building, and we have an opportunity here to really make it shine and to do so in a responsible manner. The other thing so there's that aspect of it, but the larger piece of it is we always really enjoy partnering with the city on what seem to be really complicated projects. And we enjoy trying to come up with solutions to those complex problems and do so in a way that benefits as many people as possible. And so the idea that the city is really leading the charge on a scale that none of us have ever seen before, and this is something that they are committed to doing, we are on board to help out in whatever way we can. And we will be a willing partner to brainstorm ways about making this seem as seamless as possible, so that when you're rolling it out to building owners that don't have this type of these kind of job duties that they have, that we do, it'll be simple for them, and it'll be simple for the residential homeowner that may not be used to dealing with contractors, may not be used to dealing with all of this very technical information. We want to make sure that it's as easy a process for them to handle as possible.
That's amazing, and so appreciative of both of your support. And I feel the need to say that I did not prompt either of them to say that they are so supportive of the city. This was entirely natural, but really are very, very grateful to both of you for your leadership. And it's really exciting to see this building, not only be a hub for, community and culture, but soon to be a technological hub and a real example of what the future could be like in Ithaca, which is super, super exciting. So thank you both again, and thank you for joining us today, and everyone on YouTube. This will be recorded so that you can watch it later. And we will actually be back next week with a much more contentious topic. We're going to be talking about nuclear power. So stay tuned for that next week. Same time, same place. We'll see you then. Thank you so much, Johanna and Guillermo, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you. Take care.